I came home one day from work, feeling very tired. I fell asleep in my chair, and it was about an hour I was asleep when my wife woke me to go for my dinner. She had put my dinner on the table, and she called me for my dinner. And I went in to sit down, and feeling very, very wobbly, unsteady, no coordination, nothing. And she said, "You okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm just woke up." I sat at the table. I picked up the fork and knife to feed myself, and I couldn't manage to get the fork to my mouth. It was like my hand wouldn't go to where I was telling it to go, and I had no coordination whatsoever.
So, my mum went to Bristol for a week just to stay with some friends and family, and my dad was at home in Birmingham, just going to work as normal. And we'd arranged that on the following Saturday, my dad would come and pick me up. I only lived about 6 miles away, and we would go down to Bristol together and pick my mum up and spend some time down there seeing relatives, and then come back up the following day. And when I phoned home, my mum answered, and immediately then I knew that there's something was wrong, because she should be in Bristol. And at that point, she told me that my dad had had a stroke.
After lunch or dinner, my wife said to me, "Are you feeling okay? You're not right. It's not just you're sleepy. You're not tired. There's something wrong with you." I said, "No, I'll be okay." Well, that night I went to bed. There was plenty of brain activity. I couldn't sleep. I was up and down, wobbling all over the place. Then in the morning I awoke. I tried to get dressed. I couldn't put my trousers or socks on, but I managed to get it done in the end. Then I decided I'm going to go to work. And my wife Kitty, she was protesting something terrible. "No, there's something, you can't go to work like that. There's something wrong with you." I said, "No, I'll be okay. It's just I must have something like a flu coming."
And it transpired, what had actually happened was my dad he'd been going to work during the week, but he hadn't felt very well. And on the Friday morning, when he got up, he'd forgotten how to get dressed. So he didn't go to work because he couldn't get dressed. And he knew that there was something wrong with him. So he decided he was going to go to the doctors. We've had the same family doctor for about 30 years, and they're less than a mile away from my parents' house. And he didn't drive. He was going to walk to the doctors. But he got lost. He got lost walking to the doctors, and managed to find his way back home.
So I get into the car and I'm driving along the street, 10 miles an hour. Everything seems to be so fast. It was like I was in slow motion, like in a film, in slow motion. When I got to work, I work with learning disabilities, young men and young ladies, and they said to me, I was slurring at the time. They said, "George, what's the matter with you? You're drunk." Well, they didn't say I was drunk. They said I'm the P word. I said, "No, I am not drunk. I'm okay. I'm just feeling a little bit tired." Well, my fellow workers, they recognized there was something wrong with me, and by lunchtime, my boss had come down to the place we was working, and he sat there and he spoke to me and he said, "I think there is something wrong with you. I'm going to take you to a hospital."
And at some point on the Friday, either my mum phoned him or he managed to phone my mum, and he said to her, I couldn't go to work today because I forgot how to get dressed. And my mum knew immediately that there was something seriously wrong. So she phoned their next door neighbours, who went round to get my dad, and they took him to A&E. And in the meantime, my mum in Bristol got some friends to drive her back up to Birmingham, and she met them at the hospital. So when I spoke to my mum on Saturday morning, she'd been at hospital all night with my dad, and she'd gone home to kind of get changed and go back. So I headed straight to the hospital and met them both there.
Well, after taking me to the hospital, within an hour, my wife Kitty arrived, and she looked at Mike, my boss, and she said, you know what? I know what is wrong with him, but we'll let the doctor see what is wrong with him. The doctor examined me, and then he diagnosed, he suspected I had a stroke. Well, I was dumbfounded. Absolutely dumbfounded. I said, what is, I didn't understand stroke. What is stroke? Then my wife understood stroke, because my father and her father had a stroke, but nothing like what I experienced. And what I felt after a day or so is that my right side was numb. Everything was a blur to me. I couldn't remember nothing.
Seeing my dad in hospital for the first time was a real shock. Walking up to the bed where he was, it wasn't my dad that was in the bed. It was a little old man. The transformation was just kind of unbearable, almost. I felt like I could just walk up to him and pick him up. He looked like he weighed nothing. And he was a little bit out of it. I think he nodded or smiled. He acknowledged that I'd arrived, that I was there, but he didn't really say anything. And his eyes were quite glazed. And it was really a real kind of slap in the face moment. We all know that our parents aren't invincible. But at that moment, there was a real shift in kind of roles. My dad wasn't capable or responsible for, he wasn't capable of looking after himself anymore. He wasn't the provider, he wasn't the caregiver. That had completely been taken away from him. And in terms of our relationship, it was kind of, well, what does that mean? He can't be my dad anymore. What does that mean? So that was really quite hard.
That was it, basically. And it was about 3 or 4 weeks later, I started to come round, and my slur had developed into what is diagnosed now as foreign accent syndrome, which is something you just don't know about. No one, I never heard of foreign accent syndrome. It was something completely alien to me. It was very difficult to understand this, and I just couldn't remember what was occurring. Little bits and pieces would come out of the blue, and I remember that, and I would forget this, and my wife was briefing me on everything that had happened.
Luckily, there was no lasting damage. It was a long recovery and a slow recovery, but he's probably more healthy now than he was then. And there's no kind of lasting effects of the stroke either. His speech is fine, his mobility is fine, but there was one moment around about 12 months, coming up to 12 months or just after 12 months after he had the stroke, where me and him were on a train, And we were having a conversation, and it was something completely inconsequential, like which stop would be best to get off at. But he really stuttered over something he was saying, really stammered over one of the words. And it was that moment again, it was that pulling the rug from underneath you, this, you know, your dad is losing kind of his capabilities.
Well, it was a few weeks. I started to pick up and recover and gather my strength. Then I did go back to work near 3 months later, because I was off from work all this time. And but I still had this, what they term as foreign accent syndrome, and everybody was very amused by it, because it was strange that a boy who lived in East London and Essex all of his life would speak like someone from a foreign country. Someone, I was described as being Italian, Greek, and even Asian sort of accent, and very peculiar, and but very interesting and some amusement to a lot of other people.
But that moment was even harder to some extent than the first one, because I understood it, but he understood it as well. And there's that kind of recognition that, you know, what does it mean for our relationship if he's no longer, you know, the one in charge, the one looking after me. So I think this is probably why I can't have a conversation with my dad about what happened to him, his experience of having a stroke, because both of us would have to kind of acknowledge then this shifting in kind of control and care and roles that I don't think either of us want to accept.